Today's episode of Voiced is from r/pro revenge and is about users who took matters into their own hands when betrayal struck, leading to devastating consequences. What lengths will they go to for justice? Subscribe if you enjoy. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our two kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew something was going on. Then one day, I sat down at the computer, and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college best friend, where they discussed how my wife was regularly engaging in intimate relations with one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking negatively about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten overweight after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a police officer, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a private investigator. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and times, dates, locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch. Then they'd go to a rundown motel for a few hours, after which she'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely devastated mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a vice president of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day, I had my wife served with the divorce papers at her work. I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear husband was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly. Lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kid's mom and is important to them, nothing beyond that. Wow, the fallout from infidelity can unleash a storm of unexpected chaos and pain, as we just witnessed. The initial post laid bare the intricate web of betrayal, vengeance, and the long shadows cast by broken trusts. It's a gripping tale that serves as a reminder of how actions echo in ways we might never predict. Now, speaking of consequences and unexpected twists, let's pivot to another narrative that dives deep into personal turmoil and a twisted sense of revenge. This next story finds a man grappling with his own betrayal, but it's not just him who feels the heat. It extends to his relationships and the innocence of new life. How far can one person's intentions skew the truth, and what happens when the past resurfaces at the most inconvenient moment? Let's hear the tale unfold. Last year, I cheated on my ex-girlfriend of 8 years, Annie, with a colleague, Jess, who I now have a 3-week-old son with. I have no excuse. It cost me my job and the majority of my friendships, along with the love of a good woman. I deserved it all, and I have never expected any sympathy for my actions. Annie delivered my stuff to my parents' house before I even knew she knew about the cheating. She didn't even confront me. She just cut me out of her life without a word. I messaged everyone we knew begging them to ask her to talk to me, and I sent hundreds of messages telling her how much I regretted everything and wanted her back. I never got a response. Jess saw the messages, and it obviously caused issues between us in the beginning, but she fell pregnant quickly, so we moved past it for the sake of our family together, which we both wanted. I am 100% committed to the relationship and haven't even looked at another woman since things settled down. In the final stretch of Jess's pregnancy, about a month ago, I saw Annie in a shop for the first time since the breakup. She was pretty cold towards me, but said that a few months ago, she found a keychain my grandfather got me when I was very young. It's not valuable, but she knows it means a lot to me, and she said I could come collect it the following Saturday morning. I explained that was 6 days after Jess was due to give birth, so I'd probably need to be home, but she just said I could either get it on Saturday or it was going in the bin, so I agreed to a time to go over. My son was born a few days late, but he is perfectly healthy and wonderful, so he was less than 24 hours old on the Saturday I needed to collect the keychain. I planned to pop in on the way to the hospital, but when I got to my old house, Annie invited me in to talk about how things ended between us. I thought we had a good conversation, and that both of us walked away with closure. She let me apologize for the way I treated her, wished me the best with my new family, and hugged me as I left. I admit I held on tightly for the hug, but it was purely because of the relief, not lingering feelings. I spent less than an hour at her house, then headed to the hospital. I didn't tell Jessica about any of this because I know she still feels insecure about Annie, and I didn't want to add fuel to that. When I arrived at the hospital after seeing Annie, Jess had revoked my access, and the ward manager wouldn't tell me why. I ended up being removed by a security guard because I was denied seeing my son for the second time ever and didn't respond well to being blindsided. I tried calling Jess and her mom over and over, and the only response I got was a screen recording of a message from Annie. It was doorbell footage of me walking through the door at 9:30, then back out just after 10:15, and the hug is only partly caught, so it does look like we could have been kissing. The message Annie sent with it said, "Did he even shower and change his clothes between being intimate with me and holding his son? Congratulations on being stuck with him for the next 18 years. I hope it's everything you dreamed of." No one believes this is a setup at all. It's something I would never have expected from Annie, and no one else would either, so they're completely rejecting the idea that this is a lie. I sent her a message asking why she did this, assuming I'd still be blocked. Her response was that she wasn't going to let me play innocent, and that I may have deleted all of our messages over the past few months, but she hasn't. Obviously, there are no messages, but she blocked me again straight after, so I have nothing at all to exonerate myself with. She waited in silence for almost a year, then took the most cruel and vindictive revenge she possibly could. I have met my son once, minutes after he was born, and now Jessica is refusing any contact with me and won't let me see him. Court will take months, and my heart hurts every minute of every day. I know what I did to Annie was horrible, but I don't deserve this. I have no one to talk to about it, because not even my own mother believes me. Her only question was why I ruined my life with a baby when Annie was willing to reconcile. And that's about the most supportive thing she's said to me since I was dumped. The few friends who stuck with me are assuming the worst too, and it's killing me that not a single person I know sees this for what it is. Everything is ruined. Before I dive into today's posts, please consider subscribing for more captivating stories. Wow, today's posts hit hard with the complexities of betrayal and revenge. The first one revealed an astounding turn of events, where a husband's investigation into his wife's infidelity not only led to his own liberation, but also a tumultuous fallout for the other man involved. Quite the dramatic end to a less-than-ideal love story. Meanwhile, the second post showcased a gut-wrenching twist of fate, where a man's past mistakes culminated in a heinous act of revenge that robbed him of what should have been a joyful moment with his newborn. It's a harsh reminder that the consequences of our actions ripple far beyond what we anticipate. What do you think about these stories? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Voiced. If you enjoyed daily high-quality stories, please like and subscribe to show your support.